Captain Zethara sat in her command chair, her blue skin glowing softly in the dim light of the bridge. The Starweaver had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks now, searching for new worlds to add to the galactic maps. Her crew was getting restless, but that was normal on long survey missions. The silence broke when her sensor officer, Crindal, suddenly straightened up at his station. His 4 eyes widened as he stared at his screen. "Captain," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm picking up something strange." Zethara turned her chair toward him. "What kind of strange?" "There's a ship out there. Unknown design, it's just drifting." The bridge went quiet. Finding unknown ships in deep space was rare. Most of the time it meant trouble. "How far?" Zethara asked. "About 2 million kilometers. It's small, maybe 1/10 our size." Zethara stood up and walked over to Crindal's station. The screen showed a rough outline of the mystery ship. It looked crude, like someone had built it in a hurry with whatever materials they could find. "Any signs of life?" she asked. Crindal ran more scans. His face grew pale. "Yes, Captain, there are life forms aboard. But that's not the strangest part." "Go on." "The ship's design, it doesn't match anything in our database. But I managed to trace its origin point." He paused, looking nervous. "It came from a world called Earth." The name meant nothing to Zethara at first. Then she remembered. "Earth? Isn't that one of those Class-15 worlds?" "Yes, Captain. Class-15. Deathworld. The reports say it's completely impossible for life to exist there." Zethara felt a chill run down her spine. Class-15 Deathworlds were the worst kind of planets in the galaxy. Extreme weather, deadly creatures, poisonous air, and natural disasters that could wipe out entire civilizations. No known species could survive on such a world, let alone build spaceships. "Are you certain about the readings?" she asked. "I've checked 3 times. The ship definitely came from Earth, and there are definitely living beings inside." First Officer Yemtai approached them, having overheard the conversation. "Captain, this could be dangerous. If something survived on a Class-15 world, we have no idea what we're dealing with." Zethara nodded slowly. Yemtai was right to be cautious, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. In all her years exploring space, she had never encountered anything like this. "Bring us closer," she ordered, "but keep our shields up and weapons ready." The Starweaver moved toward the unknown ship. As they got closer, the details became clearer. The ship was indeed crude by galactic standards. It used simple fusion engines that were centuries behind current technology. Its hull was made of basic metals that most species had stopped using long ago. "It's like looking at something from the Dark Ages," Crindal muttered. Communications Officer Norabeth spoke up from her station. "Captain, I'm detecting some kind of signal from the ship. It's very basic, but it seems to be trying to communicate." "Can you understand it?" "I'm working on it now." Norabeth's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "It appears to be mathematical sequences, very simple ones. Like a greeting." Zethara thought for a moment. Mathematical greetings were common in first contact situations. Most species used them because math was universal. But the idea that beings from a Class-15 Deathworld knew about first contact protocols was unsettling. "Send back a basic response," she decided. "Let them know we're here." Norabeth worked for several minutes, then sent a simple mathematical sequence back to the unknown ship. The response came almost immediately. "Captain," Norabeth said, her voice filled with surprise. "They're responding in galactic standard, basic level, but understandable." "What are they saying?" Norabeth listened to her headset, then looked up with wide eyes. "They say, 'Hello out there. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel New Horizon. We've been hoping to meet some neighbors.'" The bridge fell silent again. The casual, friendly tone of the message was not what anyone had expected from beings who had survived the impossible. "Neighbors?" Yemtai repeated. "They're treating this like a social visit." Dr. Velnara, the ship's science officer, had been quietly running scans during the conversation. She finally spoke up. "Captain, I've been analyzing the life forms on that ship. The readings are disturbing." "How so?" Their bone density is 3 times higher than any known species. Their muscle structure suggests they're built for extreme physical stress. And their brain activity patterns, they're unlike anything I've ever seen. Zathara felt her unease growing. Are they dangerous? I don't know. But everything about their biology suggests they evolved in an extremely hostile environment. Their bodies are designed for survival, under conditions that would kill most of us instantly. The communication system crackled again. Jake Morrison's voice came through clearly. Is anyone there? We'd really like to talk. We've been traveling for months, and you're the first other ship we've found. Zathara looked around at her crew. Fear and curiosity warred in their faces. These beings from Earth seemed friendly enough, but they came from a world that should have been impossible to survive. Captain, Norabeth said quietly. They're asking if they can come aboard. The request sent a wave of panic through the bridge crew. Inviting unknown aliens onto their ship was dangerous enough. Inviting beings from a Class-15 Deathworld seemed like suicide. But Jake Morrison's voice had sounded so genuinely friendly, so hopeful. Zathara found herself wanting to believe that these impossible beings might be peaceful. Tell them we need time to prepare, she said finally. But yes, we'll arrange a meeting. As Norabeth sent the message, Zathara wondered what she had just agreed to. In a few hours, she would come face to face with beings who had achieved the impossible. They had not only survived on a world that should have killed them, but had built ships and traveled to the stars. The question that worried her most was simple. What kind of creatures could thrive in hell and still sound so cheerful about meeting strangers? 3 hours later, Captain Zathara stood in Docking Bay 7, watching her crew make final preparations. Security teams had set up force fields and weapon emplacements around the meeting area. Dr. Velnara held her medical scanner ready, while Krindle monitored his sensors for any sign of danger. Are you sure about this, Captain? Yemtai asked for the 3rd time. We still don't know what we're dealing with. The scans show only 3 life forms coming aboard, Zathara replied. If they wanted to harm us, they would have sent more. Dr. Velnara looked up from her readings. Captain, I've been studying their biology more closely. These humans are built like living weapons. Their reaction times are faster than our security. Systems can track, but they haven't shown any hostile behavior, Norabeth pointed out. Every message has been polite and friendly. That might make them more dangerous, Yemtai muttered. Predators often appear harmless before they strike. The docking bay's outer doors opened with a soft hiss. A small shuttlecraft entered, moving slowly and carefully. It was as crude as the main ship, but it flew smoothly. Whoever was piloting it knew what they were doing. The shuttle landed gently on the deck. For several long minutes, nothing happened. Then a door opened on the side of the craft. The first human to step out was tall and broad-shouldered. He had short brown hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Despite the heavy gravity and strange atmosphere of the ship, he moved easily, like he was comfortable anywhere. That must be Jake Morrison, Norabeth whispered. Behind him came a woman with blonde hair tied back in a simple style. She carried what looked like a communication device and smiled at everything she saw. The third human was a man with dark skin and alert eyes. He walked like a soldier, but his face was relaxed and friendly. Jake Morrison looked around the docking bay, then focused on the group of aliens waiting for him. His face broke into a wide smile. Hello there, he said, raising one hand in what seemed to be a greeting gesture. I'm Jake Morrison. Thank you so much for letting us come aboard. His voice was warm and genuine. There was no trace of fear or aggression in it. Zathara found herself relaxing slightly despite her concerns. I am Captain Zathara, she replied. Welcome to the Star Weaver. This is Lieutenant Amy Collins, Jake said, indicating the blonde woman. She handles our communications. And this is Sergeant Pete Williams, our security specialist. Pete Williams stepped forward and nodded politely. Thank you for having us. We know this must be strange for you. Dr. Velnara stepped closer with her scanner, trying to get better readings on the humans. Amy Collins noticed the device and looked curious. Is that some kind of medical scanner? Amy asked. That's fascinating. Our equipment is much more basic. You don't mind being scanned? Dr. Velnara asked, surprised. Not at all, Jake said. We understand you need to know we're safe. Where we come from, being careful about strangers is just common sense. Dr. Velnara ran her scans while the humans waited patiently. The readings made her scales turn pale. These beings were even more dangerous than she had thought. Their bones were like metal, their muscles like cables, and their reflexes were impossibly fast. But they just stood there smiling, waiting for her to finish. Your world, Zethara began carefully. Our records say it's classified as uninhabitable. Jake laughed. Earth can be challenging, that's true, but it's home. We've learned to work with what we have. Challenging? Yemtai repeated. Our database lists constant natural disasters, extreme weather, and deadly predators. Oh, you mean like hurricanes and earthquakes? Amy said casually. Yeah, we get those. I grew up in Florida, so I'm used to hurricane season. You just prepare for them and deal with it. The alien crew exchanged horrified looks. Hurricanes were planet-killing storms on most worlds. This human spoke about them like they were minor inconveniences. What about the predators? Crindall asked. Pete Williams shrugged. Most of them leave you alone if you don't bother them. And the ones that don't, well, that's why we learned to make tools and work together. Tools? Dr. Velnara asked. Weapons mostly, Pete said matter-of-factly. Though we use them for hunting food more than fighting predators these days. The casual mention of weapons made several crew members step back. But Pete seemed to notice their reaction and quickly added, Don't worry. We didn't bring any aboard. Your ship. We're here to make friends, not enemies. Jake looked around at the nervous faces surrounding them. I think we might be giving the wrong impression. Let me try to explain better. He gestured toward a viewing port that showed Earth's sun in the distance. Our planet taught us to be tough, yes, but it also taught us to help each other. When a storm comes, neighbors work together to get through it. When someone gets hurt, everyone helps them heal. We learned that cooperation is the only way to survive. But you said you fight each other too, Yemtai pointed out. Sometimes, Jake admitted, but usually over resources or territory, and we've gotten much better at talking things out instead of fighting. Most of us, anyway. Amy Collins had been looking around the docking bay with obvious fascination. Your technology is incredible. These force fields, the artificial gravity that adjusts automatically, the translation systems that let us understand each other perfectly. We have nothing like this. How did you achieve space travel then? Crindall asked. Very carefully, Pete said with a grin, and with a lot of backup systems. When you can't rely on your equipment being perfect, you learn to plan for everything that can go wrong. Dr. Velnara finally spoke up. According to my scans, you've been in space for 6 months. In that primitive ship. 6 months isn't too bad, Jake said. We've had longer deployments. Deployments? Zethara asked. Military missions, Pete explained. Sometimes you have to stay in difficult places for extended periods. Space is actually pretty peaceful compared to some places we've been. The aliens stared at him in shock. To them, deep space was one of the most hostile environments imaginable. The idea that these humans found it peaceful was disturbing. Amy Collins noticed their expressions and laughed. I think we're scaring them, guys. Sorry about that, Jake said. We don't mean to be frightening. We're just excited to meet you. We've been hoping to find other intelligent life for centuries. Centuries? Nora Beth asked. Well, we've been wondering about it for centuries, Amy clarified. We've only been able to look for it for the past few decades. Jake looked around at the crew again. Look, I know we probably seem strange to you, but all we want is to learn about the galaxy and maybe make some friends along the way. We're explorers, not conquerors. Despite her fears, Zethara found herself believing him. There was something honest about these humans, something genuine in their curiosity and friendliness. Perhaps, she said slowly, we could continue this conversation in a more comfortable setting. Would you like a tour of our ship? Jake's face lit up. That would be amazing, thank you. As they began to walk toward the exit, Pete Williams looked back at the security setup and chuckled. "You guys really don't take chances, do you?" "We've learned to be careful," Yemtai replied stiffly. "Smart," Pete said with approval. "Careful keeps you alive." The tour of the Starweaver took 3 hours. Jake Morrison, Amy Collins, and Pete Williams asked questions about everything they saw. Their curiosity seemed endless, and their ability to understand complex systems after just one explanation amazed. The crew, Dr. Velnara, had set up her medical bay for a full examination of the humans. With Jake's permission, she ran every test she could think of. The results were beyond anything she had imagined. "Captain," she called Zethara over to look at her readings. "You need to see this." Zethara looked at the medical display and felt her blood run cold. "These numbers can't be right. I've checked them 5 times. Jake Morrison's bone density is 4 times stronger than ours. His muscle fibers are designed for incredible stress. And his immune system—" She paused, shaking her head. "He's carrying antibodies for diseases that would wipe out entire planets. How is that possible? Earth must be even worse than we thought. His body has adapted to survive things that would kill us in seconds." In the conference room, the cultural exchange continued. Amy Collins was explaining human history to an increasingly horrified audience. "The Ice Age lasted for thousands of years," she said casually. "Most of the planet was covered in ice sheets kilometers thick, but humans survived by working together and adapting." "Ice sheets kilometers thick?" Krindal repeated weakly. "That would freeze the atmosphere solid on most worlds." "It was pretty cold," Amy agreed. "But we learned to make fire, build shelters, and hunt for food even in those conditions." Pete Williams added, "That wasn't even the worst thing that happened to us. There was this asteroid impact about 65 million years ago that killed off the dinosaurs." "Dinosaurs?" Yemtai asked. "Giant reptiles. Some of them were bigger than your ship. They ruled the planet until the asteroid hit and changed the climate. The alien crew sat in stunned silence. An asteroid impact that could kill creatures the size of spaceships and change an entire planet's climate was beyond their comprehension. But life survived," Jake said. "It always does on Earth. Life finds a way to adapt and keep going no matter what happens." Norabeth managed to find her voice. "What other disasters has your world experienced?" Amy thought for a moment. "Well, there have been several mass extinctions. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years, magnetic pole reversals, climate changes that flooded continents or turned forests into deserts. And through all of this," Jake continued, "different species kept evolving and adapting. By the time humans appeared, Earth had already tested billions of different survival strategies." Dr. Velnara entered the conference room, still pale from her medical readings. "Jake, may I ask you about your physical condition?" "Sure, what would you like to know? Have you ever been seriously injured?" Jake rolled up his sleeve, showing several scars on his arm. "Broke this arm twice when I was young. Got bit by a snake once. Had surgery to remove my appendix, nothing too serious." Dr. Velnara stared at the scars. Each injury he described casually would have been fatal to most galactic species. "The snake bite," she said carefully. "What kind of snake?" "Rattlesnake. Pretty common where I grew up. The venom makes you sick, but if you get to a hospital quickly, you'll be fine." "You survived being poisoned by a predator?" "Well, yeah. We have anti-venom for most snake bites. It's not usually a big deal unless you're really far from help." Pete Williams laughed. "You should hear about the time Amy got caught in a riptide." "A what?" several aliens asked at once. "It's when the ocean current suddenly changes direction," Amy explained. "The water pulls you out to sea faster than you can swim back. I got pulled about a kilometer offshore before the Coast Guard found me." "You survived being dragged into an ocean by hostile currents?" Zethara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It was scary," Amy admitted, "but I knew to swim parallel to the shore until I got out of the current, then swim back. Basic water. Safety." The aliens exchanged looks of pure terror. These humans spoke about surviving things that would be recorded as natural disasters on any civilized world. Jake noticed their expressions. I'm starting to think we might be giving you the wrong idea about Earth. It's not as dangerous as we're making it sound." "Not dangerous?" Yemtai squeaked. "Well, it can be challenging," Jake said. "But most of the time, if you're prepared and careful, you'll be fine. We've learned to predict weather patterns, avoid dangerous animals, and build structures that can survive earthquakes and storms." "What about war?" Krindal asked quietly. "Our records show humans have fought each other." The three humans grew more serious. Pete Williams answered first. "Yes, we've had wars. Too many of them. But we've also learned from them. Most of the world has been at peace for decades now." "What were the wars like?" Dr. Velnara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Terrible," Jake said simply. "We developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We fought battles that lasted for years. Millions of people died." The conference room fell silent. The idea of a species surviving on a Class-15 Deathworld and then turning their survival skills against each other was almost incomprehensible. "But that's why we're out here," Amy said softly. "We learned that fighting each other was wasteful and destructive. We decided to focus our energy on exploration and discovery instead." "You turned your weapons into tools for exploration?" Norabeth asked. "More or less," Pete said. "The rockets that brought us to space were originally designed as weapons, but we found better uses for them." Jake leaned forward. "Look, I know all of this sounds frightening, but the same things that made us tough also taught us to value cooperation and peace. When you live on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you learn that your neighbors are your most valuable resource. We help each other," Amy added. "When disasters strike, humans from all over the world send aid. When someone makes a discovery, we share it with everyone. We learned that survival isn't about being the strongest individual, it's about being the strongest community." Dr. Velnara spoke up again. "Jake, what do you hope to accomplish out here in space?" "We want to explore, learn, and meet other intelligent species like yourselves. Earth is getting crowded, so we're also looking for new places where humans might be able to live." "New places to live?" Zethara asked. "Not to take from anyone," Jake said quickly. "We're looking for empty worlds that might be suitable for human colonies, preferably places that are already challenging, since those are the kind of environments we understand best." The aliens stared at him. The idea that anyone would voluntarily seek out challenging worlds was beyond their understanding. "What would you consider a suitable world?" Yemtai asked. Jake thought for a moment. "Well, it would need water and breathable air, some geological activity to keep the ecosystem dynamic, maybe some interesting weather patterns, a few dangerous animals to keep us alert." Pete grinned. "Basically, we want to find a planet that's like home, but maybe a little bit easier." The alien crew sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had learned. These humans had survived the impossible, turned their deadliest weapons into tools for peace, and now they were looking for more dangerous worlds to call home. And they were doing it all with genuine enthusiasm and optimism that was both inspiring and terrifying. 2 days after the first meeting, emergency signals were buzzing across the galaxy. Captain Zethara sat in her ready room, watching the stream of messages from the Galactic Council. News of the humans had spread faster than she had expected. Admiral Korath's face appeared on her screen, his scaled features showing deep concern. "Captain, I've read your reports about these humans. Are you certain about all of this?" "Yes, Admiral, everything I've reported is true. They're unlike anything we've encountered before. The Council is in emergency session. Half the species want them quarantined immediately. The other half want to study them. There's talk of classifying them as a galactic threat." Zethara felt a pang of guilt. Jake Morrison and his crew had been nothing but friendly and helpful. They didn't deserve to be treated as dangerous criminals. "Admiral, they're not hostile. They've been completely cooperative." "That might make them more dangerous, Captain. A species that can survive a Class-15 Deathworld and still appear friendly could be the most dangerous predator in the galaxy." After the call ended, Zethara walked to the observation deck where Jake Morrison was standing with Dr. Velnara. They were looking out at the stars, talking quietly about stellar formation. "The thing about stars," Jake was saying, "is that they're constantly exploding and reforming, creation and destruction happening at the same time. Kind of like life on Earth, I suppose. Dr. Velnara nodded thoughtfully. Over the past 2 days, she had grown less afraid of the humans and more fascinated by them. Jake, may I ask you something personal? Of course. When you were young, did you ever think about how dangerous your world was? Jake smiled. Not really. When you grow up somewhere, it just seems normal. I knew there were risks, but there are risks everywhere. The key is learning to manage them. But didn't the constant danger make your people aggressive or fearful? Sometimes, Jake admitted, but mostly it made us careful and cooperative. When you might face a hurricane or earthquake at any time, you learn to help your neighbors. You prepare together, and you recover together. Dr. Velnara was about to ask another question when Amy Collins joined them on the deck. She was carrying a small device that she had been working on. Jake, I think I've figured out their communication system, Amy said excitedly. It's incredibly sophisticated. They can talk to ships across the entire galaxy instantly. That's amazing, Jake replied. Our radio signals take years to travel between planets. Amy looked at Dr. Velnara. Would it be possible for us to send a message to Earth? Just to let them know we're safe and that we've made contact? Dr. Velnara hesitated. The request seemed innocent enough, but she wasn't sure about the protocols for the situation. I'll have to ask the captain, she said. Later that day, Pete Williams was in the ship's gymnasium with several of the crew members. They had been curious about human physical capabilities, so Pete had offered to demonstrate. Crindall watched in amazement as Pete lifted weights that would have crushed most aliens. How is this possible? He asked. Just normal training, Pete said, setting down the weights. On Earth, most people exercise regularly to stay healthy. Physical fitness is important when you might need to run from a storm or help someone who's injured. This is normal for humans? Yemtai asked. More or less, I'm probably in better shape than average because of my military training, but not by much. Norabeth had been watching quietly. Pete, when you were in the military, what did you do? Mostly peacekeeping operations, making sure civilians were safe during conflicts, providing security for aid workers, that sort of thing. Have you ever been in actual combat? Pete's expression grew more serious. A few times. It's not something I enjoy talking about. Were you afraid? Of course. Fear keeps you alive in dangerous situations. The trick is not letting it control you. The aliens looked at each other nervously. The idea that Pete Williams, who seemed so calm and friendly, was also a trained warrior was deeply unsettling. Meanwhile, in the ship's engineering section, Amy Collins was having a discussion with Chief Engineer Talmor about the Starweaver's power systems. Your fusion reactors are incredibly efficient, Amy said, studying the schematics. We're still using much more primitive designs. These are standard throughout the galaxy, Talmor replied. Nothing special. Maybe not to you, but to us. This is incredible technology. Though I notice you have some redundancy issues in your power distribution. Redundancy issues. Amy pointed to several areas on the schematic. If this primary conduit fails, you lose power to half the ship. On Earth, we learn to build multiple backup systems for everything critical. Why would you need so many backups? Because things break down, especially in harsh conditions. If your life support system fails during a hurricane, you don't get a second chance. Talmor studied the areas Amy had indicated. She was right. The ship's power systems had single points of failure that could be catastrophic. Could you suggest improvements? He asked. I'd be happy to help, Amy said with a smile. That evening, Captain Zethara called a meeting with her senior staff. The humans had been invited to dinner, but first, she needed to discuss the situation with her crew. I've been in contact with the Galactic Council, she began. They want us to escort the human ship to Terminus Station for formal evaluation. Is that wise? Yemtai asked. Bringing them to a major hub station? The Council believes it's necessary. They need to determine how to classify humanity and what their role in galactic society might be. Dr. Velnara spoke up. Captain, I've been studying them for 2 days now. They're not the monsters we initially thought. They're genuinely peaceful and curious people. But they're also incredibly dangerous, Crindall pointed out. Their physical capabilities alone make them formidable. Dangerous and formidable aren't the same as hostile, Norabeth said. They haven't shown any aggressive behavior. That's what worries some council members, Zathara replied. A species capable of violence but smart enough to hide it. The dinner that followed was awkward. The humans sensed the tension among the crew, though they didn't understand the cause. Is everything all right? Jake asked during the meal. You all seem worried about something. Zathara decided to be honest. Jake, the Galactic Council has asked us to escort you to Terminus Station. It's a major hub where they can properly evaluate your species' place in galactic society. That sounds interesting, Jake said. We'd be honored to meet more species and learn about the galactic community. You're not concerned about being evaluated? Yemtai asked. Pete Williams laughed. We've been evaluated by hostile forces before. At least you're being polite about it. Besides, Amy added, we want to be good neighbors. If there are procedures we need to follow, we're happy to cooperate. Their easy acceptance of what could be a dangerous situation only reinforced the crew's mixed feelings about the humans. Were they incredibly brave, completely naive, or something else entirely? After dinner, Jake Morrison found Captain Zathara on the bridge. Captain, I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us. I know this situation must be difficult for you. Jake, can I ask you something? Aren't you worried about what might happen at Terminus Station? Some species might see you as a threat. Jake considered this for a moment. We've always known that first contact would be complicated, but hiding won't solve anything. If we want to be part of the galactic community, we need to prove we can be trusted. And if some species decide you're too dangerous to trust, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I believe most intelligent beings want the same things we do: peace, security, and the chance to build something better for their children. Zathara looked at this human who spoke so calmly about facing potential hostility from an entire galaxy. How can you be so optimistic? Jake smiled. Because pessimism never solved any problems. On Earth, we learned that you can either spend your time worrying about what might go wrong, or you can spend it preparing for whatever comes next. We prefer to prepare. As the Star Weaver changed course for Terminus Station, Captain Zathara wondered if the galaxy was ready for humanity. More importantly, she wondered if humanity was ready for the galaxy. Terminus Station was the largest structure Jake Morrison had ever seen. The massive space station stretched for kilometers in every direction, with ships from dozens of different species docked at its many ports. As the New Horizon approached, under escort from the Star Weaver, Jake felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Look at the size of that thing, Amy Collins said from the pilot's seat. It must house millions of beings. Pete Williams checked his instruments. Multiple defense platforms, energy shields, and weapon systems. They're definitely taking security seriously. Can you blame them? Jake replied. From their perspective, we're complete unknowns from an impossible world. The docking process took 2 hours. Station security had cleared an entire section just for the human ship. As Jake, Amy, and Pete prepared to disembark, they could see crowds of aliens gathering behind transparent barriers to get a look at them. Captain Zathara met them at the airlock. The council is ready to see you, but first, there's been an incident. What kind of incident? Jake asked. One of the station's diplomatic staff accidentally injured himself while preparing for your arrival. His name is Tony, and he's from the crystalline species. The medical team wants to treat him, but they're concerned about contamination protocols. They followed Zathara through the station corridors. Everywhere they went, aliens stopped what they were doing to stare. Some looked curious, others appeared frightened, and a few seemed hostile. In the medical bay, they found a tall, crystalline being lying on a treatment table. His arm was cracked and leaking a blue fluid. The medical team stood around him looking worried. The problem, Dr. Velnara explained, is that Tony accidentally cut himself on a piece of equipment while setting up the meeting room. But the cut happened when he was holding a data pad with information about human biology. There might be contamination. Tony looked up weakly as they approached. I am sorry for causing trouble, he said in a voice like wind chimes. I was excited to meet the humans and was not being careful. Jake stepped forward without hesitation. Don't worry about it. Accidents happen. Can I take a look? The medical team backed away nervously as Jake examined the crack in Tony's crystalline arm. This doesn't look too serious. On Earth, we'd call this similar to a cut that needs stitches. You have experience with this kind of injury? One of the doctors asked. Not exactly like this, but I've treated plenty of cuts and broken bones. The principles are probably similar. Amy Collins had been scanning the area with a small device. Jake, I'm not detecting any dangerous contamination. The data pad just has basic biological information on it. Pete Williams looked at the crowd of nervous medical staff. You know, where we come from, when someone gets hurt, the first thing you do is help them. Everything else can wait. Jake knelt down next to Tony. Is it okay if I touch your arm? I want to see if we can stabilize the crack. Tony nodded weakly. Jake carefully examined the damaged area, then looked around the medical bay. Do you have anything like surgical glue or sealant? One of the doctors handed him a device. This creates molecular bonds in crystalline structures. Perfect. Jake worked carefully, sealing the crack while talking to Tony in a calm, reassuring voice. So you were setting up for our meeting? That was very kind of you. I have studied your species since the reports came in, Tony said, his voice growing stronger as the sealant took effect. You are fascinating, a species that survived what should have been impossible. We just did what we had to do, Jake replied, finishing his work. There, that should hold until your doctors can do a proper repair. Dr. Velnara ran a scanner over Tony's arm. The seal is perfect, the fracture is completely stabilized. Tony sat up slowly, testing his repaired arm. It feels much better. Thank you. The crowd in the medical bay had grown larger. Word was spreading throughout the station that the humans had just casually treated an injured alien using unfamiliar medical techniques. You fixed him like it was nothing, one of the doctors said in amazement. Basic first aid, Pete said with a shrug. When you live on a dangerous world, everyone learns how to treat injuries. An hour later, Jake Morrison stood before the full Galactic Council. Representatives from over 50 species filled the massive chamber, their attention focused entirely on him. Amy and Pete flanked him on either side, while Captain Zethara and her crew watched from the gallery. Council leader Vexhan, an ancient being with silver skin and multiple eyes, spoke first. Jake Morrison of Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council as a representative of humanity. We must determine your species' place in our community. Thank you for this opportunity, Jake replied. We're honored to be here. Some of our members believe humanity poses a threat to galactic peace. Your species evolved on a world that should have killed any intelligent life. You possess physical capabilities that exceed our strongest warriors. You have weapons that could devastate planets. Jake nodded. All of that is true. But we're not here to threaten anyone. We're here to learn and to help, if we can. A representative from the Valdorian hegemony stood up. How can we trust beings from a death world? Your very existence proves you are killers. Our existence proves we're survivors, Amy corrected. There's a difference. Pete Williams stepped forward. If you want to judge us by our capacity for violence, that's your choice. But you should also judge us by how we choose to use that capacity. Council leader Vexhan leaned forward. Explain. We could have come to the galaxy as conquerors, Jake said. With our technology and physical abilities, we probably could have taken what we wanted by force. Instead, we came as explorers, looking for friends and knowledge. But what do you want from us? Another representative asked. Jake thought for a moment before answering. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Earth taught us that survival depends on cooperation. We want to cooperate with the galaxy. And what can you offer in return? Amy Collins spoke up. We can go places you can't. We can survive in environments that would kill other species. We can solve problems that might seem impossible to beings from safer worlds. For example, Vexahan asked, Pete Williams looked around the chamber. We heard rumors about something called the Void Plague affecting outer rim worlds. Most species avoid those areas because they're too dangerous. For us, dangerous is just another word for interesting. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. The Void Plague was indeed spreading through the galaxy's most hostile regions, and no one had found a way to stop it. Jake continued. We're not saying we have all the answers, but we have experience dealing with things that seem impossible. If there are problems in the galaxy that need solving, especially in dangerous places, we'd like to help. Council leader Vexhan was quiet for a long moment. You would voluntarily enter hostile territory to help species you've never met? If they needed help, yes, Jake said simply. That's what neighbors do. The voting took 3 hours. Representatives argued, debated, and consulted with their homeworlds. When it was over, Council leader Vexhan announced the decision. By a narrow majority, the Galactic Council accepts humanity as a provisional member of our community. You will be granted access to galactic trade routes, communication networks, and diplomatic channels. Jake felt a surge of relief and excitement. Thank you. We won't let you down. However, Vexhan continued, your species will be classified as specialized emergency responders. When the galaxy faces crises in hostile environments, humanity will be called upon to help. Amy Collins grinned. So you want us to be the galaxy's emergency services for dangerous situations? In simple terms, yes. Pete Williams laughed. Sounds like exactly the kind of job humans would be good at. As they left the council chambers, Jake Morrison felt a sense of completion. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy not as conquerors or outcasts, but as the beings willing to go where others couldn't. Captain Zathara caught up with them in the corridor. So what happens now? Now we go home and tell Earth the good news, Jake said, and then we get ready to help our new neighbors with whatever they need. Even if it's dangerous? Jake smiled. Especially if it's dangerous. After all, that's what we do best. As the New Horizon prepared to depart Terminus Station, it was no longer alone. 3 ships from different species had volunteered to accompany the humans back to Earth, eager to learn more about the beings who had turned survival into an art form. For the first time in galactic history, a Class-15 Deathworld would receive official diplomatic visitors. And somehow, everyone involved was looking forward to the experience. Commander Jathik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, his 3 eyes scanning the holographic displays that floated before him. The massive warship hung in the darkness of space, silent and watchful. For 200 years, the Galactic Council had maintained this position. For 200 years, they had guarded the line. The line was not visible to the naked eye. It was simply a boundary in space, marked by satellites and monitoring stations. Beyond that invisible wall lay the Sol system, home to a species called humanity. The Council had put them there, locked them away from the rest of the galaxy. Some called it protection. Others called it a prison. Jathik called it necessary. All stations report normal activity, Commander, said his second officer, a young Vrelnati female named Shiral. Her scales reflected the blue light from the displays. The quarantine zone remains secure. Jathik nodded slowly. His people, the Vrelnati, were patient by nature. They could wait for centuries if needed. But even patience had limits. The humans had been behind the line for so long now. Sometimes he wondered if they ever thought about breaking free. 200 years ago, a council survey vessel had entered the Sol system. It was a routine mission, or so they thought. The ship carried scientists and diplomats, all eager to meet a new species. What they found was not what they expected. The humans attacked without warning. They used primitive weapons, chemical rockets, and nuclear warheads. The survey ship barely escaped. Half the crew died. The survivors brought back horror stories of a violent, aggressive species that shot first and never asked questions. The council debated for months. Some wanted to destroy humanity before they could become a threat. Others argued for patience and understanding. In the end, they chose containment. They built the line and told humanity to stay behind it. Any ship that crossed would be destroyed. That was 200 years ago. Since then, silence. The humans never tried to contact the council. They never attempted to cross the line. It was as if they had accepted their fate. Commander, Keelm called from the science station. The insect-like Trithnari clicked his mandibles nervously. I'm detecting unusual readings from inside the quarantine zone. Jothik moved to the science station, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet bridge. What kind of readings? Energy signatures. Multiple sources. They're moving toward the line. Keelm's antennae twitched. Sir, these signatures are stronger than anything we've detected from humanity before. A cold feeling spread through Jothik's body. How many sources? Counting now. At least 100, no more. Still counting. Keelm looked up, his compound eyes reflecting genuine fear. Commander, there are hundreds of ships approaching the line. The bridge fell silent. Every crew member turned to stare at the main display. Jothik felt his heart beating faster. This was it. After 200 years, the humans were making their move. Sound alert status, Jothik ordered. Notify Council Fleet Command. Activate all defense platforms. Red lights began flashing throughout the ship. Across the entire fleet, thousands of vessels received the same message. The humans were coming. Counselor Mazir appeared on the communication screen. The elderly Fashir looked tired, his gray skin sagging with age. Commander Jothik, I just received your alert. Is this confirmed? Yes, Counselor. Human vessels are approaching the line in force. We count at least 300 ships, possibly more. Mazir closed all four of his eyes. This is what I feared. This is why we kept them contained. They're too aggressive, too unpredictable. He opened his eyes again. You have authorization to use necessary force. Do not let them cross the line. The communication ended. Jothik stared at the empty screen for a moment. Use necessary force. That meant war. That meant killing. Sir, the human ships are still approaching, Shiral reported. They're not slowing down. Broadcast on all frequencies, Jothik ordered. Tell them to stop immediately or we will fire. The communications officer, a Helixian with long, flexible fingers, worked quickly. Broadcasting now, sir. All known human frequencies, they waited. The seconds felt like hours. The human ships continued forward, now less than 1 million kilometers from the line. Any response? Jothik asked. Nothing, Commander. They're ignoring our warnings. Jothik's mind raced. If they crossed the line, he would have to fire. If he fired, thousands would die. But if he let them through, what message would that send? That the Council was weak? That containment meant nothing. Fleet Formation Delta, he commanded. All ships battle positions. Charge weapons. Across the void, the Council fleet moved into position. 2,000 warships, the pride of 12 different species, formed a wall of steel and energy. Their weapons powered up, ready to unleash destruction. The human ships crossed the line. They've breached the quarantine zone, Shiral shouted. Commander, what are your orders? Jothik opened his mouth to give the order to fire. But something stopped him. The human ships were not attacking. They were simply moving forward, steady and purposeful. There was no aggression in their formation. They looked almost peaceful. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. It's from the human fleet. Sir, they're speaking in Galactic Standard. Jothik's blood ran cold. Galactic Standard. That was impossible. Humans had been isolated for 200 years. How could they know the common language of the Council? Put it through, a voice filled the bridge. It was human, speaking with careful precision. Council fleet, this is the human vessel Defiance. We are not here to fight. We are here to talk. We know you're out there. We've known for decades. Murmurs spread across the bridge. Kel made a chittering sound of surprise. Shiral's scales changed color, showing her shock. How? Jothik whispered. Then louder. How do you know our language? How did you detect us? The human voice continued calm and steady. 200 years ago, you left something behind when your survey ship fled our system. Debris, wreckage, technology, we studied it. We learned from it. We've been listening to your communications ever since. We know about the Council. We know about the species that make it up. We know about your laws, your culture, your wars. Jothik felt dizzy. The humans had been watching them. Learning. All this time, the Council thought they were in control, thought they were the ones doing the observing. But the humans had turned the tables. You have no right to cross the line, Jothik said, trying to sound authoritative. Return to your system immediately. There was a pause. Then laughter. A human laugh, strange and alien to Vrelnathi ears. Commander, we spent 200 years in a cage. We're done asking for permission. We're claiming our right to the stars. Stand aside or don't, but we're not going back. More ships appeared on the sensors. Not hundreds, thousands. They had been hiding using some kind of camouflage technology the Council couldn't detect. Kelm stared at his instruments in disbelief. Commander, I'm reading over 3,000 human vessels now. Where do they all come from? Jothik didn't answer. He was watching the main display, watching the human fleet spread out before him like a vast net. They had played the Council perfectly. They had appeared weak, isolated, contained. But all along they had been building, growing, preparing. The defiance transmitted again. We request formal parley with Council leadership. We have much to discuss. The galaxy is bigger than you know, and the threats are greater than you imagine. You need us, Council fleet. You just don't know it yet. Jothik looked around his bridge. Every face showed the same expression. Fear, wonder, confusion. The careful order of 200 years had shattered in moments. Send the message to Council headquarters. Jothik said quietly. Tell them humanity has entered the line. Tell them everything has changed. The Council response came within hours. Do not engage unless attacked. Attempt all first contact protocols. Stall until reinforcements arrive. Jothik read the orders 3 times. Stall. As if the humans were some minor problem that could be managed with procedure and patience. But looking at the thousands of ships on his display, he knew better. This was not a problem. This was a revolution. Begin first contact protocols, he ordered. Sequence Alpha 1. The Council had developed these protocols over thousands of years. They were designed to communicate with any intelligent species, no matter how different. Mathematics was universal. Patterns were universal. Surely the humans would understand. The communications officer sent out the first sequence. Prime numbers. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, simple, clear. A message that said, we are intelligent beings who wish to communicate. The human response came immediately. They sent back the next 20 prime numbers in perfect order, then added a message. We learned your protocols from your databases. Do you have anything new to say? Kelm made a nervous clicking sound. They hacked our databases? When? How? That debris from 200 years ago, Jothik said bitterly. They must have recovered computer systems. Probably spent decades breaking our encryption. He felt a grudging respect for the humans. They were clever. Dangerously clever. Try Protocol Beta 3, he ordered. Universal friendship greeting. The communications officer transmitted complex geometric patterns and color sequences that had been proven to create positive emotional responses in over 50 known species. The Council had refined these greetings over millennia. The humans responded with a simple message. Pretty pictures. Now can we talk like adults? Several crew members made sounds of shock. Shiral's scales flushed orange with embarrassment. The humans were mocking them. Counselor Mazir appeared on the screen again, this time with other Council members visible behind him. Commander, we're watching your transmissions. The humans are being deliberately provocative. Show them the consequences of crossing the line. Fire warning shots. Jothik hesitated. Counselor, with respect, I don't think warning shots will... That's an order, Commander. Jothik gestured to his weapons officer. Target empty space ahead of the human formation. Plasma cannons only fire. Blue bolts of superheated plasma shot across the void. Each shot contained enough energy to vaporize a small moon. They streaked toward the human ships calculated to pass just ahead of their formation. But the shots never made it past the human fleet. Point defense systems, small and precise, intercepted every single plasma bolt. The shots exploded harmlessly in space, creating brief flowers of light that faded quickly. They stopped our warning shots, the weapons officer said, his voice shaking. Sir, those systems are incredibly precise. Better than anything we have. Jothik pulled up the analysis data. The human point defense had reacted in microseconds. The targeting was perfect. This wasn't luck. This was technology that exceeded Council standards. How is this possible? Mazir demanded from the screen. They were primitives 200 years ago. Chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. How did they advance so quickly? Kelm spoke up, his scientific mind working through the problem. Counselor, humans have shorter lifespans than most Council species. They live perhaps 80 to 100 of their years. That means they've gone through multiple generations since first contact. Each generation building on the last, each one pushing harder, faster. And they were motivated, Jothik added. We locked them in a cage. Every human child grew up knowing there was a galaxy beyond their reach. That kind of pressure either breaks a species or makes them stronger. Clearly it made them stronger, Shiral said quietly. The main display suddenly filled with new contacts. More human ships appeared, materializing out of empty space like ghosts becoming solid. The fleet count jumped from 3,000 to 5,000, then 6,000, then 7,000. Stealth technology, Kilm breathed. They've been hiding additional ships. We couldn't even detect them. The human voice returned, the same calm tone as before. Council fleet, we're showing you our full strength now. We could have stayed hidden. We could have surprised you. But we're not here for war. We're here for recognition. A new image appeared on all council displays. A human face. The creature had 2 eyes, forward-facing like a predator. Brown skin, black hair cut short. Male probably based on the facial structure. He wore a dark uniform with symbols that meant nothing to council species. I am Admiral Chen Wei of the Terran Space Force. I speak for humanity. We have a proposal for the Galactic Council. Mazir leaned forward. The Council does not negotiate with species who break containment protocols. Then you're fools, Chen Wei said bluntly. While you've been watching us, we've been watching you. Specifically, we've been watching your war. Silence filled every council ship within range. Jothik felt his blood turn cold. What war? Mazir asked, but his voice was weak. Chen Wei smiled. It was not a friendly expression. The war you've been fighting for 80 years. The war against the Krith swarm. The war you're losing. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Jothik could see dozens of council members shouting at their screens. The Krith war was classified at the highest levels. Only military commanders and top council leadership knew the full extent of the threat. How do you know about the Krith? Jothik demanded. Your communications aren't as secure as you think, Chen Wei replied. We've intercepted battle reports, casualty lists, resource allocation requests. We've watched you lose system after system. We've seen your retreat strategies, and we've analyzed your tactics. Another human appeared next to Chen Wei. This one was female with dark skin and gray hair. She wore different clothing, more formal. I am Ambassador Sarah Okonkwo. I speak for Earth's diplomatic corps. The Krith swarm is spreading from the galactic edge inward. Your defensive strategies are failing because you're fighting a war of containment. You cannot contain the Krith. You can only destroy them. And you think you can do better? Mazir asked scornfully. We know we can, Okonkwo said, because we've been preparing. For 50 years, humanity has been running simulations. We've studied every Krith battle. We've analyzed their tactics, their biology, their technology. We know their weaknesses. Chen Wei touched a control. New displays appeared showing battle scenarios. Human ships engaged Krith vessels in dozens of different situations. The tactics were aggressive, brutal, and effective. You fight defensively, Chen Wei explained. You protect your worlds and wait for the Krith to attack. Then you respond. By then it's too late. You're always reacting, never acting. He highlighted a human strategy. We would fight offensively. We would take the battle to the Krith. We would board their ships, destroy their command nodes, disrupt their hive communications. We would make them afraid. The Council does not approve of such aggressive warfare, Mazir said stiffly. Then the Council will die, Chen Wei said simply. The Krith don't care about your approval. They don't negotiate. They don't surrender. They consume and they expand. The only language they understand is force. Okonkwo stepped forward. We're offering you a choice, Council. Grant humanity full membership. Give us access to your technology, your intelligence, your resources. In return, we'll help you fight the Krith. We'll show you how to win. And if we refuse? Mazir asked. Chen Wei's smile returned, cold and hard. Then we'll go fight the Krith ourselves. We'll prove our worth by saving the worlds you can't. And when we've pushed the Krith back, when we've done what you couldn't do in 80 years, we'll return. And then we'll have this conversation again. But by then you won't be negotiating from strength. You'll be begging for our help. Jothik watched the council members on his screen. They were angry, frightened, and desperate all at once. The humans had backed them into a corner. Accept them as equals or be humiliated by watching them succeed where the council had failed. This is blackmail, Mazir said. This is reality, Okonkwo replied gently. We're not your enemies, Council. We could have been. We had every reason to hate you after 200 years of imprisonment. But we learned something during those years. We learned patience. We learned to think long-term. And we learned that the galaxy is too dangerous for any species to face alone. Chen-Wei nodded. We need each other. You need our tactics and our willingness to take risks. We need your knowledge and your resources. Together we can stop the Krith. Divided we all fail. The transmission ended. The human ships held their position, waiting. Jothik looked at his crew. Every face showed the same confusion he felt. The humans had come with overwhelming force, but they were asking for partnership. They had demonstrated superiority, but they were offering cooperation. It didn't match any profile the Council had developed. They're not what we expected, Kelm said softly. No, Jothik agreed. They're worse or better. I can't decide which. On his screen, Mazir was arguing with other Council members. Jothik couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see the result. The Council was divided. Some saw opportunity, others saw only threat. But looking at the 7,000 human ships that hung before him, Jothik knew one thing with certainty. Everything had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. The neutral station hung at the edge of the line like a pearl in darkness. It had been built centuries ago for exactly this purpose, negotiations between species that didn't trust each other. The station was automated, protected by powerful shields, and designed to self-destruct if anyone tried to take control by force. Jothik had never actually been to the station before. In 200 years of guarding the line, there had been no need. Now he walked its corridors with careful steps flanked by 2 guards. They were heading to the central meeting chamber where history would be made or broken. The chamber was circular, with seats arranged in a ring. No position was superior to another. No species sat above the rest. It was designed for equality, though Jothik suspected that design would be tested today. Council members were already present. Mazir sat with other senior counselors representing 12 different species. They wore their finest formal clothing, colors, and styles from a dozen worlds. They looked impressive and important. Then the humans arrived and everything changed. Admiral Chen-Wei entered first, walking with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. Ambassador Okonkwo followed carrying a data tablet. Behind them came 6 other humans, military officers and diplomats. They wore simple uniforms, dark blue with silver details. No fancy decorations. No excessive displays of rank, but they didn't need decorations. Their presence alone commanded respect. Jothik studied them carefully. Humans were smaller than most council species. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. Physically they seemed unremarkable, but there was something in the way they moved. Purpose, direction, like predators who had chosen not to hunt but could change their mind at any moment. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Okonkwo said. She spoke Galactic Standard perfectly with only a slight accent. We understand this situation is unusual. Unusual? Mazir's voice was sharp. You broke a 200-year quarantine. You invaded council space with military force. You threaten us with ultimatums. This goes far beyond unusual. Chen-Wei smiled slightly. We prefer to think of it as making a dramatic entrance. Several council members made sounds of outrage. Kelm, sitting near Jothik, clicked nervously. But Jothik found himself almost amused. The humans had a strange sense of humor about serious matters. Let's be clear about the situation, Okonkwo said, her tone becoming more formal. Humanity has been imprisoned for 2 centuries because of one violent encounter. An encounter that happened when we were barely beginning to explore our own solar system. We've changed since then. We've grown, but you never gave us a chance to prove it. You proved your nature, Mazir replied. Violence is what you understand. Violence is what everyone understands, Chen-Wei said coldly. The difference is we're honest about it. You dress up warfare with protocols and procedures, but in the end you point weapons at problems just like we do. The only difference is we're better at it. Counselor Traven, a tall Helixian with golden skin, leaned forward. You claim to understand the Krith threat. Prove it. What do you know about them? Okonkwo touched her tablet. Holographic displays filled the center of the chamber. Images of Krith vessels, battle formations, attack patterns. Data scrolled past hundreds of pages of analysis. The Krith are a hive-minded species, Okonkwo began. Individual units have limited intelligence, but collectively, they form a sophisticated command structure. They communicate through quantum entanglement, which makes their coordination nearly perfect. They don't feel fear. They don't negotiate. They exist only to consume resources and expand. We know all this, Traven said impatiently. Then you know their weakness, Chenwei said. Disrupt the command nodes and the swarm falls apart. The individual units lose coordination. They become easy targets. We've tried attacking command nodes, Jathik said. They're too well protected. We lose dozens of ships trying to break through their defenses. Because you attack from outside, Chenwei replied. You use long-range weapons trying to break through their shields. We would board them. The chamber fell silent. Boarding actions were considered barbaric, a tactic from primitive times. Modern warfare was conducted at distance with energy weapons and missiles. The idea of actually entering an enemy ship was almost unthinkable. You can't be serious, Mazir said. We're completely serious, Chenwei said. Small teams, heavily armed, using stealth insertion. Get inside their shields, fight through their corridors, destroy the command nodes from within. It's dangerous. Many will die. But it works? How do you know it will work? Kelm asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. Okonkwo smiled. We've tested it. Not against the Krith, obviously, but against simulated Krith defenses. We built mock-ups of their ships based on your battle reports. We trained thousands of Marines in close-quarters combat. We ran scenarios for 30 years. She pulled up new images. Human soldiers in heavy armor, carrying weapons that looked brutal and efficient, training facilities that recreated alien environments, endless drills and exercises. You prepared for a war you weren't even part of, Traven said, sounding impressed despite himself. We prepared for the war we knew was coming, Chenwei corrected. The Krith won't stop at council borders. Eventually they'll reach Seoul. We'd rather face them with allies than alone. Mazir stood up, his four hands clenched in anger. This is what I warned the council about. This is why we kept humanity contained. You're too aggressive, too militaristic. You think only of war and violence. No, Okonkwo said firmly. We think of survival. There's a difference. We don't want war, Council. We want peace, but we're willing to fight for it. She stepped closer to Mazir, meeting his eyes without fear. You want to know the real reason you kept us behind the line? It wasn't because we attacked one ship 200 years ago. It was because you were afraid of what we'd become if you gave us access to your technology. Mazir said nothing. You were right to be afraid, Okonkwo continued, but not for the reasons you think. You weren't afraid we'd conquer you. You were afraid we'd show you what you've forgotten, that sometimes survival requires sacrifice, that sometimes you have to take risks, that sometimes you have to be willing to fight instead of just defend. She pulled up another display. This one showed council battle reports from the past 80 years, a steady pattern of retreat, of worlds lost, of populations evacuated, a long, slow defeat. In 80 years of fighting the Krith, you've never won a major offensive operation. Okonkwo said quietly. You've saved lives through evacuation. You've delayed them with defensive positions, but you've never actually pushed them back. Not once. The council members looked at the data. No one could deny it. We can change that, Chenwei said. Give us a chance. One battle. Let us prove our tactics work. If we fail, you can send us back behind the line and forget we ever crossed it. But if you succeed, we grant you full council membership, Traven finished. He looked at Mazir. It's a reasonable offer. It's a trap, Mazir said. They'll prove themselves in one battle, join the council, and then gradually take control. They'll remake us in their image. Or, Jathik said, speaking for the first time in the meeting, they'll help us survive. And isn't that worth the risk? Mazir turned to glare at him. Commander, you're supposed to support the council's position. I do support the council, Jathik said calmly. I support keeping the council alive. The humans are offering us a weapon we desperately need. Their tactics may be brutal, but they may also be effective. Can we afford to refuse? The other council members began talking among themselves. Arguments filled the chamber. Some agreed with Mazir, seeing only danger in accepting humans. Others saw opportunity, a chance to finally turn the tide against the Krith. Okonkwo waited patiently while they debated. Chenwei stood with his arms crossed, watching everything with those predator eyes. The other humans remained silent, letting their leader speak for them. Finally, Traven raised his hand for silence. I propose a compromise. We allow humanity to participate in the next defensive operation against the Krith. They will fight alongside council forces. If their tactics prove effective, we will reconsider their membership status. That's barely different from their original proposal, Mazir protested. But it gives us control, Traven replied. They fight under our command. They follow our rules of engagement. If they prove too aggressive or dangerous, we can end the partnership. Chenwei and Okonkwo looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then Okonkwo nodded. We accept, she said. Under one condition. If we prove our worth, the membership vote happens immediately. No delays, no further tests. One battle, one chance, agreed, Traven said. He looked around the chamber. All in favor? Hands were raised. Not all of them. Mazir kept his 4 hands firmly down, but enough supported the motion. The vote passed. Then it's decided, Traven announced. Humanity will fight alongside the Council fleet. May the Void have mercy on us all. Jothik watched the humans as they left the chamber. They walked with satisfaction, like hunters who had successfully stalked their prey. But there was something else too, relief. They had genuinely wanted this partnership. For all their strength and confidence, they had been worried the Council would refuse. Kelm clicked quietly beside him. Do you think we made the right choice? Jothik thought about that the alarm came during the night shift, 3 days after the negotiation. Jothik was sleeping in his quarters when the emergency lights flooded his room with red illumination. He was on the bridge within 2 minutes, still fastening his uniform. Report, he ordered. Shiral was at her station, her scales pale with stress. Krith swarm, sir. Massive force. They've entered the Terath system, 3 jumps from here. 2 billion civilians on those worlds. Jothik felt ice in his chest. The Terath system was a core council territory. 3 populated planets, dozens of orbital stations. If it fell, millions would die before they could evacuate. Council fleet is scrambling, Shiral continued. Every available ship is being called to defend Terath, including us, and including the human fleet. Status of human forces? Already moving, sir. They began acceleration the moment the alarm sounded. They'll reach Terath before we do. Jothik pulled up the tactical display. The Krith force was enormous, at least 500 vessels, maybe more. The Council could bring perhaps 400 ships to the defense. Not good odds, but they'd faced worse. The Eternal Vigil jumped to hyperspace along with the rest of the fleet. The journey would take 6 hours. 6 hours to prepare, 6 hours to wonder if they would live or die. On the bridge, no one spoke. They had all fought the Krith before. They knew what was coming. When they emerged from hyperspace at Terath, the battle had already begun. The humans hadn't waited. The display showed chaos. Krith vessels swarmed around the 3 planets like insects around rotting fruit. Their ships were organic-looking things, grown rather than built. They moved in perfect coordination, never colliding, never confused. The hive mind controlled them all, and fighting through that swarm were the human ships. Jothik had expected the humans to fight from range, using their advanced weapons to pick off Krith vessels. Instead, they fought like madmen. Human ships dove straight into the thickest Krith formations, firing at point-blank range. They rammed Krith vessels when their weapons overheated. They used the destroyed wrecks of enemy ships as shields while they reloaded. They're going to get themselves killed, Kelm whispered. But they weren't dying, at least not fast enough to matter. For every human ship destroyed, they took down 4 or 5 Krith vessels. The exchange rate was brutal but effective. Council fleet, this is Admiral Chenwei, the transmission came through. Good timing. We've been keeping them busy, but there's too many. We need your heavy firepower on the command ships. Jothik pulled up the tactical analysis. The humans had identified the Krith command vessels. There were 3 of them. Massive bioships that coordinated entire sections of the swarm. Destroying them was the key to victory. It always had been, but they were too well protected, surrounded by hundreds of smaller Krith ships. Admiral Chen, those vessels are behind defensive screens we can't penetrate, Jothik replied. We'll get you through, Chenwei said. Follow our lead. And Commander? This is going to get rough. Tell your crew to hold on. What followed was the most insane combat maneuver Jothik had ever witnessed. The human fleet formed a wedge with their heaviest ships at the point. They accelerated directly at the Krith defensive screen, absorbing terrible damage. Ships exploded. Hulls were torn apart, but the wedge didn't break. They smashed through the Krith lines like a spear through flesh. All ships follow the human wedge, Jothik ordered. Pour fire into the command ships. The Council fleet followed, protected by the corridor of destruction the humans had carved. Council warships unleashed their most powerful weapons: plasma cannons, antimatter missiles, graviton beams. The Krith command ships tried to evade, but they were too large, too slow. The first command ship died in a blast of blue fire. Immediately, hundreds of Krith vessels lost coordination. They continued fighting, but their perfect teamwork was gone. They became individuals, easier to target, easier to destroy. Second command ship forward section. Chenwei called, "Hit it now!" But before the council ships could target it, a human vessel broke from formation. The ship was burning, its hull breached in dozens of places. It had maybe minutes before total systems failure. Instead of retreating, it accelerated straight at the command ship. "What are they doing?" Shiral gasped. Jothik understood a moment before impact. Ramming speed. The human ship hit the Krith command vessel at full acceleration. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. And another section of the Krith swarm fell into confusion. Did they just sacrifice themselves? Kelm asked in horror. "They saved thousands of lives," Jothik said quietly. "Focus fire on the third command ship." But the humans weren't done with their insane tactics. Dozens of small craft launched from the human fleet. They were tiny things, barely visible on sensors. They flew straight at the remaining command ship, dodging defensive fire with impossible agility. "What are those?" Shiral asked. "Boarding craft," Kelm said, staring at his sensors. "They're actually going to board the command ship." The small craft attached themselves to the Krith vessel like parasites. Explosive charges blew holes in the organic hull. Human soldiers poured inside, hundreds of them, carrying weapons and moving with purpose. On the tactical display, Jothik could see the damage reports from inside the Krith ship. The humans were fighting through corridors, facing Krith warriors in close combat. It was brutal. Casualties were enormous. But the humans kept pushing forward. "They've reached the command core," Kelm reported. "They're planting charges." "All ships pull back from the command vessel," Jothik ordered. "Give them room." The council fleet retreated. The Krith swarmed around the command ship, trying to protect it. But it was too late. The explosions came from inside. The command ship tore itself apart from within. The hull ruptured in a dozen places. Atmosphere vented into space. The massive vessel began to spin out of control, dying, and with it died the coordination of the entire Krith swarm. The remaining vessels lost all cohesion. They became a mob, dangerous but disorganized. The council fleet and human ships cut through them with methodical efficiency. 2 hours later, it was over. The Krith were destroyed or retreating. Terath was saved, but the cost had been terrible. Jothik looked at the casualty reports and felt sick. The human fleet had entered the battle with 2,000 ships. Now they had less than 1,200. 40% losses. By council standards, that was a disaster. A defeat even if they'd won the battle. But the humans saw it differently. "Terath saved," Chenwei transmitted. His voice was tired but satisfied. 2 billion civilians safe. 3 Krith command ships destroyed. I'd call that a victory. Jothik watched the human fleet regroup. The surviving ships were battered, scarred, leaking atmosphere and fluids. But they maintained formation. They remained ready to fight. "Admiral Chen," Jothik said slowly, "your losses were catastrophic. You lost nearly half your fleet." There was a pause. Then Chenwei replied, his voice soft but firm. "Commander, we lost ships. But we saved lives. Human lives. Council lives. Lives we've never even met. Species we barely know. That's not a loss. That's what we came here to do." Jothik closed his eyes. He thought about council warfare, where preserving ships and minimizing casualties was the primary goal. Where retreating to save forces was considered wisdom. The humans had abandoned that entire philosophy. They threw themselves into danger not because they didn't value their lives, but because they valued other lives more. "The boarding teams," Jothik asked. "How many survived?" Another pause. Longer this time. Out of 600 Marines who boarded the command ship, 32 made it out. The rest are gone. 32 out of 600. Jothik felt the weight of that number. Hundreds of humans had walked into certain death to save people they didn't know, and they'd done it without hesitation. On his tactical display, he watched human rescue craft moving through the debris field, searching for survivors. They were pulling council crew from damaged ships even though their own people were dying. They were towing council vessels to safety even though their own ships needed repairs. Shiral spoke quietly. "They're not like us." "No," Jothik agreed. "They're exactly like us. They're just braver about showing it." A transmission came from council headquarters. Counselor Traven appeared on screen. Behind him, Jothik could see the full council chamber. Every member was present. Even Mazir. Commander Jothik, Admiral Chen Wei, Ambassador Okonkwo, Traven said formally. The council has witnessed the battle for Terath. We have reviewed the tactical data. We have seen the human sacrifice. He paused, looking at something off-screen. Then he looked directly at the camera. The council votes now on the question of human membership. After what we've witnessed, after what humanity has proven, the vote is merely a formality. But it must be done properly. Traven called for the vote. Hands were raised across the chamber. One by one, council members voted yes, even some who had opposed humanity before. Even Mazir, who raised his hands slowly but raised them nonetheless. The vote is unanimous, Traven announced. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Welcome, humans. Welcome to the stars you fought so hard to reach. On the human flagship Defiance, Admiral Chen Wei stood silently. The memorial took place in space near where the line had once been drawn. Thousands of ships gathered, human and council vessels side by side. They floated in the darkness together, united in grief and respect. Jothik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, watching the ceremony on his display. Human bodies were being released into space, each one in a sealed container marked with their name and rank. Traditional burial, Admiral Chen had explained, giving their dead to the stars they had fought to reach. 837, Kelm said quietly. That's how many humans died at Terath, Jothik nodded. 837 people who would never see their homeworld again. 837 families who would mourn. It was a small number compared to the billions saved, but each one was a universe of loss. They knew the risks, Shiral said. They went anyway. That's what makes them remarkable, Jothik replied. In the 3 weeks since the battle, everything had changed. Human technology was being shared with Council scientists. Human tactical doctrine was being studied by Council military academies. Human diplomats were taking their seats in the Council chamber, their voices now equal to any other species. But more than that, something fundamental had shifted in how the Council thought about warfare. For 80 years they had fought the Krith defensively, always reacting, always retreating. The humans had shown them a different way. Not reckless aggression but calculated risk. Not careless violence but purposeful sacrifice. Kelm pulled up new data on his display. Commander, I've been analyzing the Krith command ship that the humans boarded. The data they recovered is extraordinary. Jothik moved to the science station. What did they find? Location data. The humans found the Krith's navigation records. We now know where they're coming from, which systems they've already consumed, and potentially where their central hive is located. Jothik stared at the data. In 80 years of fighting, the Council had never been able to locate the Krith home systems. They had tried, desperately, but the Krith never left survivors who could provide that information. The humans had found it in one battle by doing what the Council considered impossible. They had gone inside a Krith ship and taken what they needed. This changes everything, Jothik said. With this information, we can plan offensive operations. Real offensives, not just defensive holding actions. The humans are already planning, Kelm said. Ambassador Okonkwo has proposed a joint task force. Human tactics combined with Council firepower. They're calling it Operation Lighthouse. Lighthouse? Human metaphor, Kelm explained. A light that guides ships home. They want to push the Krith back so far that Council worlds will be safe. A light in the darkness, Jothik considered that. For 80 years, the Council had been losing ground. Now for the first time they were talking about taking it back. Not just surviving, but winning. A transmission request came from the Council chamber. Jothik accepted it. Councillor Mazir appeared on screen, looking older than usual. The battle had aged him. Commander Jothik, Mazir said formally, I wanted to speak with you privately before the Council makes its announcement. Of course, Councillor. Mazir was quiet for a moment, his 4 hands clasped together. I was wrong about humanity. I spent 200 years convinced they were a threat. I fought against their inclusion. I believed containment was the only safe option. He looked directly at Jothik. I watched them die at Terath. I watched them sacrifice themselves for people they'd never met. And I realized something. I wasn't afraid of what humanity would do to us. I was afraid of what they would show us about ourselves. What do you mean? Jothik asked. We've become comfortable, Mazir said. Safe, we avoid risks. We value preservation over action. The Krith have been pushing us back for 80 years, and we've let them because fighting back would cost too much. We've forgotten how to truly fight for what we believe in." He gestured to something off-screen. "The humans haven't forgotten. They came out of containment angry and determined. They could have fought us. They could have taken revenge for 200 years of imprisonment. Instead, they offered partnership. They offered to die for us. That takes courage we've lost." "You're being too hard on the Council," Jathik said. "We've saved billions through evacuation and defense." "Yes," Mazir agreed. "But the humans saved billions through offense and sacrifice. There's a difference. One prolongs the war. The other ends it." The transmission ended, leaving Jathik alone with his thoughts. He looked at the memorial still playing on his screen. The last of the human dead were being released to space. Behind them, human and Council ships maintained perfect formation, a final salute to those who had fallen. Shiral interrupted his thoughts. "Commander, new orders from Council Fleet Command. We're being reassigned." "Where?" "Human liaison duty. We're to work directly with the Terran Space Force, helping coordinate joint operations." She paused. "Sir, they specifically requested you." Jathik felt a mixture of honor and trepidation. "Did they say why?" Admiral Chen said, and I quote, "Commander Jathik was willing to trust us when trust wasn't easy. That's the kind of officer we need leading this new alliance." Hours later, Jathik found himself on a transport heading to the human flagship Defiance. It was his first time on a human vessel. The corridors were narrower than Council ships designed for their smaller frames. The walls were covered with displays showing Earth, a blue and green world that looked surprisingly beautiful. Admiral Chenwei met him in the conference room. The human looked tired but determined. Next to him was Ambassador Okonkwo and several other officers Jathik didn't recognize. "Commander Jathik," Chen said, extending his hand in the human greeting. "Thank you for agreeing to work with us." Jathik took the hand, trying to match the firm grip. "The honor is mine, Admiral. Your people proved themselves at Tereth. We proved we're willing to die," Chen said. "Now we need to prove we can live. The war against the Krith isn't over. It's just beginning." Okonkwo activated a holographic display. It showed the galaxy, with Krith-controlled systems marked in red. There were too many red marks. But now there were also blue marks showing a proposed offensive route. "Operation Lighthouse," she explained. "We're not just going to push the Krith back. We're going to destroy their ability to wage war. We've analyzed their supply lines, their breeding systems, their command structure. We know where to hit them." "This will be dangerous," one of the human officers said. "We'll lose people. Lots of people. But if we succeed, we can end this war in 5 years instead of another 80. Jathik studied the plan. It was aggressive, risky, and completely against Council military doctrine. It was also brilliant. "When do we begin?" he asked. Chen smiled. 2 months. We need time to repair our fleet, train Council forces in our tactics, and coordinate logistics. But in 2 months we go on the offensive." Over the following weeks, Jathik watched the transformation of the Council military. Human instructors taught boarding tactics to Council Marines. Human engineers helped retrofit Council ships with new weapons. Human strategists shared their doctrine of aggressive, decisive warfare. It wasn't always smooth. Council species struggled with human tactics that seemed reckless. Humans struggled with Council procedures that seemed overcautious. But slowly they learned from each other. The Council became bolder. The humans became more disciplined. Kelm spent hours with human scientists analyzing the data from the Krith command ship. He reported back with growing excitement. "The humans think differently than us," he explained to Jathik. "When we encounter a problem, we try to solve it within existing knowledge. Humans ask, what if we try something completely different? It's maddening but effective." The memorial satellites that had been placed near the old line were gradually removed. In their place, new construction began. Joint defense stations crewed by both human and Council personnel. Training facilities where the two forces could learn together. Diplomatic outposts where ideas could be exchanged. The line itself, that invisible boundary that had separated humanity from the galaxy for 2 centuries, was officially dissolved. In its place, Council cartographers simply marked human space on their maps, integrated with Council territory as if it had always been there. 6 months after the Battle of Tereth, the Joint Fleet assembled for Operation Lighthouse. Over 3,000 ships, the largest offensive force in Council history. Half were Council vessels, half were human. all flew the new combined fleet banner, a symbol that represented both peoples working together. Jothik stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, now designated as a command ship for the joint fleet. Shirel was at her station, her scales showing excitement rather than fear. Kelm worked with a human scientist, both of them analyzing final target data. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the communication screen. "All ships report ready, Commander. We're waiting on your order." It was a small gesture giving Jothik the honor of starting the operation, but it meant something. It meant the humans saw the Council as true partners, not just followers. "All ships," Jothik said clearly. "Execute Operation Lighthouse. Take us to the Krith home systems. It's time to end this war." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, thousands of ships moving as one, human and Council, different but united, heading toward a